To the young listeners, do not apply on LinkedIn. Do not apply online. Find the industry that you love. Go to the person. Don't sell anything. Tell them that who you are as a person and why you're interested, and ask them for a coffee. Book a flight. Go to San Francisco. Make a day of 5 coffees so you can. Don't put all your eggs in one basket. Go and engage. The planet, as we get more technical, is becoming more impersonal, except for when you meet people. So go do that.
Welcome to Adapt or Die, Transformative Leadership Conversation. This is the show where I invite top executives, CEOs, change makers, and founders who have lived through those pivotal moments where they had to either pivot or to perish. My name is Andreas Pettersson. I'm a former tech CEO, and I'm an executive coach these days for Leaders Adapt. Welcome so much to the show, Marius.
Great to have you, Andreas. We're going to go through an intensive Arabic study to get some of these names down next. Mubadala and those, but it'll be great.
Yeah, sorry about the names there. I have to agree. I have actually heard you speak Arabic. We were out in, I forgot where it was, somewhere in Newport Beach, and you ran into some people and you started talking about surfing down the coast somewhere and sharks or whatever it was. But before we jump into all of the interesting stories you have, can you give the listener a little bit of a background of who you are and how come you ended up working on the other side of the world?
Yeah, sure. I'd be happy to. And this is my first ever podcast. When I was in my career, I was raised to sort of be shy away from sort of speaking outside of the work stuff when I was at the Federal Reserve Bank and at Goldman and at Bobadilla. But it's an interesting world, and I certainly think that I have a bit of a story to tell on that. So I'm from Chicago originally. I'm from the north side of Chicago. I had European parents. So when everyone else went to summers in Makajuan and Lake Geneva, I ended up getting shipped over to Zurich and Lithuania to go play cello and soccer with a bunch of kids that spoke and Lithuanian and German slang that I didn't understand. But I learned about the world outside. And in the home, we were raised also in a Lithuanian and German environment. And the world of the multicultural planet was always clear for us when we were growing up. So it had a very substantial and important tone and in terms of a perspective and a world that I knew was outside the United States. I kept that curiosity in me forever. When I went to college at Northwestern, I hung out with a lot of foreign exchange kids. We would always go play soccer. I was always quite good at soccer, and we would always play soccer instead of the other sports. And then I took that into my career too. So I started at the Federal Reserve Bank and at Goldman. And after Goldman at Northwestern, I really wanted to move abroad. So my idea was to work in Germany with Goldman, and then a series of events happened. I'm happy to talk about that with you. And I ended up in the Middle East for 20 years, of all places. So that's an interesting story. I'm happy to get into that. And I think that whole cycle, that whole arc of life has kind of come back to me moving back to the U.S. a couple of years ago and realizing how interesting the United States is, but also understanding that in the context of how, integrated we are in the global community. And that has a sort of a real relevance today with politics and all the different activities and tariffs and what have you, all the zeitgeist of all these terms. But we are a very interconnected world, and it's quite a delicate balance with all that. And knowing that the world exists outside the U.S.'s borders is a really important perspective I think more Americans should have.
I love it. Do you define yourself as American or global citizen or?
Yeah, that's a great question. I've been thinking about that. I'm 100% American. I'm definitely, I love, it's the identity that I have, being raised here and being in this always optimistic culture that is the United States. It's different. Children that were raised in the United States are just different when they go abroad in many ways. They are just active and gay. They kind of are not afraid to fail in many ways. And then you see other cultures, how they're raised. There's just really sort of this blind optimism of being raised in the U.S. And that's not what is great about it, but it's just this country provides a sort of confidence, and it's been incredibly wonderful for the upward mobility of my parents and the community that I was raised in. And my identity is 100% American. When I go to Germany or even Lithuania, there is a heritage link to those countries for sure. Heritage is the key word. But there is not a feeling that I will ever be a European or an Emirati if I got a citizenship there. You know, it's more for sure. The DNA is raised as an American, but I love knowing and being able to navigate the planet outside the United States.
I love that answer. And I can relate to that, obviously. Being born in Sweden, moved to US in 2014. Obviously, we learn English at an early age, and Sweden is very, what I call Americanized. All the TV shows are Americanized and so on. But culturally, there is a big difference. The downside I have noticed, Marius, is after living in US for a decade, I don't feel Swedish, but I don't feel fully American either. So I'm trying to still understand who am I and in the context. And I mean, I have no plans of moving back. I love US. I love exactly what you're mentioning, the opportunity, the positive mindset, anything is possible. But then every now and then I run into situations where I'm like, shoot, why did I say or act or do that? And I realize it's the European in me that just haven't really acclimatized fully.
See, I also think it's super important that Americans realize that the optimism, this sort of blind optimism that I mentioned, doesn't mean that we are number one right off the bat, right? I think I think the ultimate combination is knowing the benefits of living in a society that is so pro-business and so encouraging of people to lean in and try things. That's what America is. It's a try. And the sky's the limit if you make it. But I also believe that we have severe limitations in this country, and especially after living abroad in the UAE. I mean, for all those years, the amount of security, the amount of support from moments when you really need it, truly. And I think you could have a view of the benefits of living in the United States, but definitely debate the shortcomings without being non-patriotic. And I don't know why. It's interesting to come back to this country and realize that like a debate when it comes to politics is so polarizing and that like you're in or you're out. 100% you can be in, but look at improving your daily way of living. And boy, we have many gaps in this country. And it's been interesting to see that after coming back after not living here for 20 years.
I'll just add to that before I ask you the next question, and that is, I think I agree. There's very polarized here. European, Asian is way more grayscale, Middle East. But the difference is, and that's the part I'm missing here in US, is the curiosity to understand the other party, not to answer, but to actually understand it so you can make up your own mind on your own beliefs a little bit more. And that's the one part I wish I could see more on here in US. But every time the topic comes up, it's hard. But let me ask you a little bit. It's kind of related here. What's the principle you never compromise on?
No, when we spoke prior, we talked about a couple of these buzzwords. I think integrity is if you do not have individual integrity, everything else is compromised. Everything. Authenticity comes from integrity. Leadership comes from integrity. Persistence and getting really through the dark days where you really need it's 12:30 or 2 a.m. You really have to finish this, but you have a call at 8 a.m., a big one again. The integrity drives. It is the foundation of the human. And when that integrity cracks, you start to compromise on some of your business relationship, your home relationships, and it's tough to keep putting pressure on something that has a foundation that has a crack into it. So your number one thing, even if everything goes just belly up, is always the principle of integrity. You can you can interact with anybody you want from any gender or races or backgrounds or any businesses, as long as you have the integrity angle into it. And that is really interesting. I mean, to comment on that just slightly, it's really interesting to come back to the United States sometimes and see, I think that's all over the planet, incidentally. I don't think it's in the US at all. But I think that there's sometimes in our rush to be the best of who we are, to find that dream or whatever, the materialistic dream, there's sometimes a bit of a compromise, right? I'm not talking about being a little bit fudging or being sort of fake it till you make it. There's a little of that. but never the foundations of integrity. You never want to compromise those, because after that, it's a house of cards.
I'm with you. Walk me through a situation, Marius, where you have either integrity was challenged or a business partnership, can be international. It doesn't have to be in US, can be anywhere, where you either second guessed your own integrity. And I mean, or how did you end up to the point where you're at today where this is not something I compromise on?
Yeah, so there have been many times in the past where um, maybe you see the different things happening, and you are young or a junior, or you're part of a process, and you don't have a leadership view on that, and you're sort of married to an idea, and you don't want to disrupt it, where you don't say anything. But at some point, your intuition will really pop up. If you're truly true to who you are, your intuition will pop up and guide you. There are little moments, and it'll guide you. It can be little moments, it can be big moments, actually, where you just don't do something that you know is a bad idea, or you step away from something which is just fundamentally, it won't work out. So as you know, recently I stepped away from a large program that had a really interesting potential here in the US, a really fascinating project. But at my age and with my experience, I really took that to ninth inning. And I did a lot of work prior to realizing and thinking, is this what I want to, or asking others also. People, and each person should have a kind of a mentor circle around them too, of people that they can call on when they need some guidance. And I did. I took the time. It wasn't a reaction. I just really took the time to think, is this something that I would want to do? And it wasn't. And I stepped away. And to this day, I was like, yeah, it'll be fine. It won't work out or whatever. To this day, it's been great. And I'm happy I did. And I've heard back from things on that project. That project is still sort of going sideways. And that's sort of, I always would have predicted that might happen, but I'm also pleased in the peace of mind on stepping away from something that goes, it provides such tension in your mind on the lack of integrity is so key to kind of also maintaining your personal balance. And boy, do we all need balance in a day where we don't have enough hours or the days or the minutes. And having things compound that don't make sense because they're a violation of your integrity, don't do it. No dollar on planet Earth is worse than pursuing for that stuff. So that you pick up with time, but it's the little things along the way that you learn to spot those traits where you know how to make those decisions.
I just want to say two quotes and then I have a follow-up question. So first of all, I usually say this here on the podcast. You don't know that, Marius, but I have two favorite quotes. It's not what we say yes to that makes us successful. It's what we say no to. And the second thing for me is life is long if you know how to use it. You can also make your life very short if you're not actively making conscious decisions. But you talk a lot about in terms of trusting your gut feel, trusting your intuition. So let's pretend that you're talking to a younger founder, a younger leader, someone who's listening to this podcast. Like you said, experience will get you it. But how can you fast track it? What are the methods, the signs, or the mindset that you need to take in order for you not to stumble into these in late 20s, 30s, and really screw it up for a decade to come?
I think there's this poem by the man in the arena as a jiu-jitsu guy. We all know this poem about, it's the celebration of the person that's fighting. It's not the celebration of the victory or the loss. It's the celebration of the person that took the courage to step into the arena. For every Google out there, or for every Tesla, there's a Rivian. And Rivian also has had a really rough run over the last 5 years. For every Google, there's other search and Yahoo. What happened there, right? So I think it's not a question of you being, I was even in the Middle East for 20 years. And sometimes I regret spending that much time over there, right? But on the other hand, it's just standing up to the table and being and putting your best and planning and being honest on what you want to achieve and build out of those programs. It's not necessarily, are you wasting your time in that one area? But if you have a vision, and you may be totally wrong. I mean, I got to give credit to some of the Bitcoin guys that were in it from 2015 who still saw the potential of a different type of a currency structure. So I think if you dive in, and if you plan And if you are proactive and you're strategic, you will learn a heck of a lot of things along the way. And that experience base will create a more balanced perspective for everything in life. So it's not necessarily being in the wrong cycle for some time. You can be totally wrong in the wrong spot your whole life. But if you just do that, you pick up those experiences along the way, because that life happens, things interact with you and what have you, and you just get a ton of knowledge and perspective. And so I think it's not about wasting your time in one spot or making sure that you look up. I think you can pivot later. I think the life is a generation of learning. I moved to the Middle East when I was 25. I started my company at 35. I moved back to the US at 45. I expect to be doing something cool at 55. And at 65, I'm going to sit down and just listen to the Grateful Dead for a whole year and relax. But I think whatever the material or the financial outcome of that, it doesn't matter to me, to be honest with you. And I didn't come from some major trust fund or something. It's just that I ponied up every time I did any of these things. I moved to the Middle East without knowing anybody. I ended up working with His Highness in Dubai. I spent 10 years in Abu Dhabi in Mubadala. We helped craft global joint ventures with Airbus and Boeing. I'm not even an aerospace engineer guy, but I leaned in, and that leaning in allowed me to get that perspective. So I think it's less about finding success, or maybe if I recall the question, it's more not that you're doing something the wrong way, but just lean into what you're doing and you'll pivot along the way, and make sure you got a mentor base. And if success is an IPO, good for you, man. I have some friends who are professors at NYU that are very good friends who are extremely happy with what they teach and how they make an impact. I have another friend who's the CEO of Deliveroo, Will Shu. He was our best friend at Northwestern. So I am more about leaning into living life and being passionate about a vision that you have, whether it's a cellist or a surfer. And you do that, and you'll find out those experiences along the way that create a real character and personality.
I love that answer. I could not agree with you more. And then muscles and scars. The more you do, the more you try, the more you go for it, the more muscles you're going to have. And you're going to have a bunch of scars as well.
We talk about that a lot at Souling when we have phone calls. We give good advice at Souling on the Middle East, not because I have a friend who's His Highness, which I do, or the fact that I worked at Mubadala or that. It's just because the trial and error, how many things have I lost along the way? We've raised 1.76 billion. We've swung at 4. For another client lost quite a bit of money recently because they didn't have the right tax structure in place. Fine. And all that was on our shoulders. He has a salary, he has carry and everything, but that upside we lost. So we say, if you had to take off our back, you could see all the scars on us on that. But do you know how much that informs you on your next conversation? How much that informs you on your next relationship? It's all accretive. So, you can take it forward. You can mourn and you can feel sorry for those moments, but they are truly, they help build character. And I know, shout out to my little jiu-jitsu guys, whoever's listening, the jiu-jitsu community. Talk about an awful learning curve for anyone that gets into that sport. If you are not ready to kind of develop your scars of that experience, you're not going to get anywhere, and you lose all the time. It wasn't Roger Federer. He said that he only became a champion on aggregate after winning something like 20 points more than his other opponent after that type of a career. Think about that. That's crazy.
It's crazy.
So these failures are part of life. The question is, do you get set back? Do you get scared of trying after a failure? That's the question. Mm-hmm. Where you like whole workout to begin with, or are you kind of a fool where you run after the rainbows because you just want to be a multiple founder and a serial entrepreneur, and you start 7 things. You don't put any plan behind anything. You don't put any good resource or good thinking behind those things, and you just run it. And you blame the other guys or that for not working out. Yes, you sound like a fool. And coming back to the US, I would say there's so many examples of where you can see just rubbish from how people didn't, the stories that they tell, and you can tell it was a flaky thing and it became a learning thing. It's not. They just ran at the Don Quixote worlds out there, and that they misused their allocation and time. And that is a decision that they made on themselves, not to, they just, nothing good, really everything is hard. So it takes those times to build those out. And that humility and those failures are part of that process.
Marius, did you ever doubt in those moments? Did you ever doubt your own leadership as a CEO? What was going on in your mind? And I think it's important for the listeners to understand that, yes, a lot of founders and CEOs, we face fear, we move forward, but that doesn't mean that the thought process of the opposite isn't there. How do you manage that?
Well, I think I have an interesting answer to that. I think leadership can be knowing yourself. I'll tell you why. It sounds a bit cheesy, but follow me with this. So I started Soling, and now we have 4 partners, and we do a lot of interesting work. In many ways, I'm not the leader of that company, even though I am the signatory on our accounts and all that, because I'm not really the guy. I don't like being the person that puts together organizations and teams. I sort of like running at building the business or like doing the biz dev side of it. I really like doing that. But I think leadership, for all those CEOs out there that are listening to this, I think it's a question of knowing what your strengths are and then finding the complementary team that matches your vision and who you are as a culture and style so that you can round out where you're weak. I'm sure people have heard that before, but boy, is it true.
No, you need to you need to scream it from the top of your lungs. The clients I work with when I'm advising board members, founders, CEOs, they all think they understand truly who they are. Most of the times they don't. And as a result, they have built a team of people that are just like them. And diversity is how you become successful.
We debate a lot within our team at Soling, and we do it on the directions of what we do. We want to build a GP business. That do we want? What are we going to amend? How is the Middle East changing? How should we change our business? These are the most healthy debates on the planet. They're not great. They don't make you feel good because the thing that you had a conviction on, you have to get convinced otherwise. But if the sleds is pulling in that direction and one dog is running this way, then he kind of gets pulled over. Because I think the ability to listen without thinking that you need to be a leader as like a general that's barking orders up and down the chain. I don't think I've met too many people on this planet who are fantastic operators, visionaries, biz dev people, lawyer, like legal, and anyone who thinks they can do that together. It's like, plus, there's plenty of people out there, but it's just hard that could do that. But most of the time, you want to focus on the thing that you're quite good at and build out a couple of people around that share the same vision. And, you can do more together with that. So I think leadership is knowing yourself and then being able to supplement that and making sure everybody pulls in the same direction because they're inspired to do that, where their strengths work to their favor. And boy, can you get a lot done if you have that around you.
I love that definition. I agree with you 1,000%. By the way, let me know if you ever want to hype me up before I go on a stage talking about something. You did that really good there. This is exactly what I help others with, Marius, and I wish more people could understand, like, the more you understand yourself, the more you can control what's in between here or in between the ears, the better you are and the better team you will set up. Tell me about some of the achievements you have done. I mean, you lived a very interesting life. I heard a lot of your stories. Tell me a couple of stories where you have achieved something personally or your team have achieved something personally. It's just not something you can Google or it's not in the headlines anywhere, but you are extremely proud of it.
I'm trying to give you some categorized or some by calendar sort of different achievements. First off, I give myself some credit for leaning into moving to the Middle East at the age of 23 without any background in the Middle East whatsoever. That was the steepest learning curve on the planet, but I felt my intuition that I should give this a shot. And I got that 100% right. I think everyone at the age of between 20 to 25, you should be one big R&D center. And I don't mean, I think you should get a job, but you should be constantly talking about different ideas and thinking about new idea, and then finding a friend who's 35. That's what you should do when you're 25, because you don't really
5 to 40. I agree.
or you should find two friends. Stop making it awkward. Be nice friends with the 35. Don't ask them for a job. Just ask them for their advice, because they have this kind of 10-year lead vision on what you got. I think the leaning in, I think the Middle East move was incredible. And the move to Mubadala was, when I wanted to get the job at Mubadala, I wrote an email to the front door. I wrote to HR, and I still have the email that said, "Thank you for applying. We're not interested." Of course not. I mean, here you are applying. You don't know who you are. You're not Emirati. You're not related to any His Highness or Prince. But I realized that the way I should do this is not write an email, but be a little bit more audacious. So in 2006, I picked up the phone and I called Mubadala's front number and I said, "Can I speak to an American, please?" And the operator was like, "What? Who? What?" I was like, "Please, I'm an American. May I please speak to another American?" And there was a bit of a pause, and then there was another man that picked up the phone. He walked up to the phone. He's like, "Hi, I'm Albert Stromquist. How can I help you?" It was a chap who we used to work at Enron back when Enron, prior to the collapse, but they created a partnership together and they did the Dolphin Energy Project. And he had a son my age, and I asked him, "Can we just please have a coffee? I've heard about your company called Mubadala. Do you mind if I drive up to Abu Dhabi and we have a coffee?" And he's like, "Sure, that's it. That's it." So I drove the car all the way down to Abu Dhabi, back when they had speed bumps and there was a mosque in between, guys selling newspapers in the speed bumps. And I met Albert Stromquist, who put me in touch with Walid Makarab. And Walid hired me at Mubadala. But had I not given that a shot, I would have never joined Mubadala, and I would have never learned and soaked up so much of that amazing culture and how they see the world and how they work with partners. So it's not off the pitch book. And I think maybe to the young listeners, do not apply on LinkedIn. Do not apply online. Find the industry that you love. Go to the person. Don't sell anything. Tell them that who you are as a person and why you're interested, and ask them for a coffee. Book a flight. Go to San Francisco. Make a day of 5 coffees so you can. Don't put all your eggs in one basket. Go and engage. The planet, as we get more technical, is becoming more impersonal, except for when you meet people. So go do that. I think the Mubadala one was good. I think the other one, Andreas, if I can just chat a little bit here. Sorry for carrying on. I think jiu-jitsu was insane, and being competing in those tournaments was incredible. And it's hard to describe to you what that feels like, because jiu-jitsu is already a high-intensity, high adrenaline sport because somebody's trying to kill you and choke you out. So you combined all of the fact that when you go to these competitions, it's one-on-one against another tiger that's trying to kill you. On a stage, when you walk out in the arena and the whole place is full of people, they're not necessarily looking at you. There's a couple other mats, but hey, there could be 200 eyes on you in addition to the other 2 mats or 3 mats. And you have to fight against another person on the other side. And boy, do a lot of things come up in your mind on that or that or that. I give credit to my cello days about being able to manage in front of an audience and knowing perfectionism, but I've never had a cello is you against yourself and what you remember. And incidentally, it's also not easy at all. The jiu-jitsu at my age, when I was competing in those tournaments at 33, provided, and I would win or then lose in the final for one of them. But when you win along the way, that provides this incredible achievement feeling. It's truly sort of really, that's your stripe forever on your life, on your arm. That's the other achievement is starting my company. Last example here, Andreas, and we'll pause on this topic. I think when I started my firm, Soling Partners, I knew that I wanted to make a transition out of Mubadala. Not because anything at Mubadala, I loved it, but it had been 10 years and it was time to evolve. I knew that. I had this inherent feeling inside. And I remember some sleepless nights where I would wake up and walk around at 2 a.m. thinking I am completely worthless. I only know the Middle East. I'm just this guy that works this sovereign fund. I can't go back to investment banking. I can't go, I don't want to move back to the U.S. right away. when you start a company, nothing is written for you. Nobody's there to help you, nothing. So when you start that process, you really have to trust yourself that that one step leads to another. And starting souling to me was a major requirement for this life. I'm happy that in this life, I was an entrepreneur and I've been able to deliver a lot of success.
I want to
So
underline this for the listeners because I see so many people who screw this up. Keep taking one step forward. If you fail at something, start again, just start again. But it's the small micro actions, like what you said there, that's what makes a difference.
I mean, you're right, and I'm happy to anytime any of your listeners want to talk to me and you about this, I'm happy to chat with them. But when I started souling, it was one step at a time. It was one, and all of a sudden, you take those steps and you look back, and you're 50 paces in. The bricks are built. You start reaching out to emails. Some come back, some don't. And then all of a sudden, you write the notes that, hey, I'm starting this. People lean in. And Trish Berrigan, the lady who is one of the founders of Benson Elliott, she knew me and she told me, you'll never forget your first clients. And Trish Berrigan and Hans-Jörg Herzog from Fish Asset Management, Trish looked at me, she goes, I know that you're not one of the major head guys, but in the culture of our firm and who I am as a person, I'm going to hire you because I believe that you're going to be able to do this and I'm going to hire you. And you never, ever forget your first two clients, ever. Now we're talking at 25 at a time, but the first people who make a bet on you, that also changes your life. So, purse to her, she passed away. She had a brain tumor a few years back. And that was, I remember, Maria also remembers I lit a candle at our home. We kept it on all night because that like personally impacted me because these people bet on you and they listen to that story. So that's for everybody. You'll always remember your first client or your first someone that leaned into your vision and all of a sudden starts to compound. It's actually quite neat and fascinating. So those are the achievements. Sorry, long story, but that's what it is.
I love it though. No, but I think this is what I'm trying to get to all the other listeners. If they can learn from how we approached things, how we failed fast forward, how we kept moving, then maybe the journey feels a little bit better or they don't feel alone. Like maybe it doesn't give them the tool they need, but at least they know they're not alone. One thing I want to add before we go into the lightning round here is the number one advice I give any founder, any CEO, any entrepreneur out there struggling, once a week, pick a day, journal down what you have accomplished that week. And then the next week, look back at the last week. Once a quarter, look back at the whole quarter. Once a year, look back at the whole year. And take the time to do it. Because when you're banking on your experience, you become so much less fearless for what the future holds. And you go faster and faster and faster. The CEOs who don't recognize what they have been through, they tend to stumble on the same problems over and over again at the same speed. So journaling and reflection are some of the best drivers for any founder and CEO.
Okay, I'll start today, okay?
I know you're doing it up here. I've heard that the stories doesn't come out of just improv because you are reflecting, Marius. I know that. Okay, let's do lightning round. These are a little bit quicker answer. First things that comes to your mind, you will feel uncomfortable. That's perfectly fine. Okay, leadership lesson that you learned the hard way.
Leadership lesson. Sometimes you will fail.
Agree. Tougher to manage, sovereign wealth fund or entrepreneurial ventures?
Sovereign wealth fund by a large stretch. Yeah, it's fun. Being an entrepreneur is fun. A sovereign wealth, a very delicate balance across a lot of different, very complicated topics with long-term visions. And at those guys at the IC at those levels, I give them a bunch of credit. They have earned a long life process. And anyway.
Okay. A book or a mental model that you revisit often?
So surfing cleans my palate and it provides me balance. So it's less of a book. I wish I read more. And it's less a mental moment. But when I connect with nature and Mother Nature and I give her a chance to give me perspective, I walk out and it all makes sense. That's why I surf.
It's so common to you're not alone. A lot of founder CEOs I talk to, it's all back to nature. There's something there that just can't be explained. A personal practice for staying aware or avoiding blind spots.
Um, Not. I think you have to analyze and spend a lot of time doing your assessment and creating your plan and looking at all the facets so that you can avoid the blind spots and you don't run into things making a mistake. But blind spots are called blind spots for a reason. They will always be there, and sometimes you can never see them coming. So prep, but don't be afraid of hitting those spots and
And
fixing it
don't
while you're
and don't beat yourself up for them either.
correct. Yeah.
What's the biggest myth about international relationships and business?
That people on the other side of the table are simple. They are not. In fact, they're probably often a lot smarter than the counterpart if it's an American. People abroad are always told that there's a delicate everything. They don't talk. They think a lot. They pick up a lot. They look at the subtleties. And our current presidency, you can read him like a book. He's the easiest thing in the world to manage, to be honest. Is simplissimo. It's easy. But I think, and I don't want to make it political, but it's just one example. I think that folks, there are extraordinarily clever, sensitive, sophisticated, thoughtful people on the other side of the table when it comes to international relations. And boy, are they lovely people and great people to build relationships with and learn from. So that's what I have to say. Do not underestimate foreigners just because they're foreigners and not from the United States.
And don't judge them. And they speak with silence. In addition to everything you said. Marius, you agreed to go on this podcast because I've been nagging you because I want to hear your stories. But can you tell the listeners why should they be reaching out to you? What is it that you're looking for? And what would be sort of the one thing, if that becomes true, you're happy?
Yeah. I moved back to the United States. I was happy to join the podcast because it is a unique story. I'm quite a humble person, but I do have interesting background stuff, and I didn't have shared enough about that. And many people have talked about sharing and writing things. So it's not about me sharing those stories. People will go through their own stories and everyone has their own uniqueness. I am just happy to meet people like you, Andreas, here in the United States, people who have integrity and lean into things. And I don't know the US. Coming back here, it's been 3 years that I've been back post the pandemic. It would be really neat to connect with those that have neat ideas, those that don't want to share a business pitch, but just want to find a common ground on a personal level where we can just become friends and build out a network of like-minded, interesting people who have integrity, who are not in any rush to make a buck, but also want to connect with core stuff. And I would love to meet those type of people and learn from them. That's sort of, if I had to be a little bit selfish in this podcast, that's what I would say.
You're not selfish. You're basically saying, I want to find people who have passion, drive, and equal life values. And life is too long, or life is long, but you have to live it with other people. It gets very lonely otherwise. Anyway,
Right.
Marius, I want to thank you so much for doing this. I know this was your first podcast. I am fascinated by your stories when you and I are out walking. And I think today was not any difference. I want to thank also everyone who listened to Adapt or Die. If today's conversation helped you, please share it with another leader, another person that is considering an international career, another entrepreneur, another founder. And you can find us on Apple Podcast, searching for Adapt or Die. Please leave us a 5-star review. It helps us grow the awareness around leadership, mindset, and business. And please remember, in leadership, we adapt and thrive, or we don't survive. Until next time, bye.